Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice for radio, so today I'm going to be showing you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, my second favourite deck ever. The other day we had a reminder of Donphan Prime and how much I love that, but here's a little deck that I played for a little bit in 2012 that just for a short period of time really hatched up against the format. It is all based around Regigigas EX. Now, a little bit of history here. Back when Regigigas EX was revealed, there was only really one site doing translations. It's not the same as it is now. And for a very brief period of time, they mistranslated the first attack. Now, they fixed it very quickly. But initially, instead of saying 60 damage, you can do 20 more, but you do 20 to yourself, it was translated as you can do as many amount times 20 as you like, and you do that much to yourself. So you can do 20 to them, 20 to you, or 60 to them, 60 to you, or 100 to them, 100 to you. And then I'm thinking, well, hang on a second, they've got free energy for this attack. So if I can get free energy on Regigigas, I can just win the game. Like, every time. Really quickly. It's an immense attack. Now, it was changed, unfortunately, and the real translation came out as you can only do a max 80, but it still got me thinking that there's a whole bunch of Pokemon at the time, like Shaman and like Smeargle, that are seeing a lot of play that have 80 HP, so you know what, I thought, let's give this a go, let's make a deck, and so I made a Regigigas deck. Now the other attack for 4 energy did 50 damage, plus 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon, and you had 180 HP, which at the time was as high as it got. Now, you were weak to Terrakion, there's nothing we can do about that, but otherwise, this was a very bulky Pokemon, which means Raging Hammer, 50 damage, plus as much as is on you, it's an outrage attack. You know what? This could be pretty useful. Now obviously you've got double colourless energy to help pay this cost here, but I needed some extra energy acceleration, and whereas people would later go for Celebi in this kind of situation, I chose to go for Jirachi. Now, Jirachi was a great little Pokemon that got a couple of prints, and what you did was when you put it on the bench, you flipped 3 coins. And for every heads you got, you could take 1 psychic energy from the discard pile and attach it to Jirachi. And then you would use Shaman to just move the energy over. That's what Shaman did. So the theory here is quite simple. You discard the energy as fast as you can. You then drop Jirachi, hope to hit as many heads as you can. And then you just attach them to Jirachi and move them over with Shaman. Technically, you could also use the attack here to devolve because you were using psychic energy, but we never ended up doing so. And that was the core idea behind Regigigas. You're going to be hitting for 80 damage from the first turn every single game, and you're basically just going to be daring your opponent to try and keep up. It was fun. Now, we did need another attacker here, and I'm afraid at the time it had to be Mewtwo EX. The Mewtwo wars were absolutely everywhere. That defined the 2012 format. You're playing double colourless energy, so you're playing Mewtwo. The really cool thing about this particular deck was, because you were using Jirachi, you actually could use Side Drive on a Mewtwo. 120 damage, discard, and energy. Now, with a plus power, that would get a KO on something like a Zekrom or a Reshiram, both of which were very big at the time. But also, generally speaking, when we're talking about the Mewtwo wars back then, it was somebody put a double colourless on a Mewtwo, and someone else put free energy or used a plus power to get a KO. It was hard to get a KO on a 0 energy Mewtwo, you'd need 4 energy and a plus power. But with Side Drive here, you could actually get a KO on a 0 energy Mewtwo while only having 2 energy left on you, so your opponent would have to find something like a plus power. It was awesome. Now, there were a couple of other Pokemon we saw here. We did play Smeargle. Smeargle had Portrait. Look at your opponent's hand. You find a supporter you find there and you use it. Yeah, sometimes you'd hit a Professor Juniper and get rid of a hand you really liked, but you had to be careful about when you used it. This just gave you extra speed and extra consistency, which was very important because, well, the whole point of this deck was to be fast and outspeed your opponent. We also played Tornadus from Emerging Powers. It wasn't a great Pokemon, but 80 damage, moving energy to your bench so you didn't have it essentially all the energy going when you got KO'd. But the other thing here was just Terrakion. You had to have an answer against Terrakion. Regigigas wasn't good enough. Mewtwo wasn't great for Terrakion. Even though you could get a KO with Psydrive, you never wanted to KO a single prize Pokemon with Mewtwo, giving your opponent an easy return KO. Because the vast majority of people played Mewtwo, double colorless energy, and plus power. Now, in terms of the trainers we would see in a deck like this, we had the staples at the time, Dual Ball and Pokemon Collector. They were great. Pokemon Collector, just search for free basics and put them in your hand. It was ridiculous. And Dual Ball here, just a great little card. Flip 2 coins for each heads. You got to take a basic Pokemon and put it into your hand. Given that this deck was all based around basic Pokemon, the combination of Pokemon Collector and Dual Ball did very nicely indeed. We also saw Sky Arrow Bridge here. Sky Arrow Bridge was awesome because it gave free retreat, or I should say lower retreat, to all of your basic Pokemon. If you got a basic Pokemon, the retreat is lowered by 1. That means Tornadus has free retreat. That means that Jirachi has free retreat. Okay, Mewtwo doesn't, but it's got a lower retreat. A Regigigas doesn't, but it's got, I say a lower retreat, it's still a huge retreat. Regigigas is a big boy. We see Pokemon Catcher here, bearing in mind this was pre-errata Pokemon Catcher. This was when Pokemon Catcher did not require a coin flip, or as I often like to put it, it was basically a Lysander as an item card. You played it because it was over-the-top broken nuts good. Speaking of cards that were over-the-top broken nuts good, Junk Arm. Junk Arm allowed you to discard 2 cards from your hand and grab a trainer into your hand. This was when trainer meant item, so you could only grab items, not supporters or anything like that. To put it bluntly, first of all, this was over the top great because you could reuse stuff like Pokemon Catcher and Plus Power, which we also played, but also this discarded cards from your hand. Remember, to get Jirachi working, you need to discard your energy. This did that very nicely indeed. And another good way we had to discard energy here was Sage's Training. Sage's Training was a mildly terrifying supporter card in that you would look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you would put 2 in your hand and you would discard the other 3. 99% of the time when you played it, you would then also have to discard a Sage's Training. That's just what happened. But honestly here, you were trying to discard energy while setting up. You would have some gross discards from Sage's Training, so you had to be quite careful using it. In terms of the other trainers here, we had Juniper and Professor Oak's New Theory, or if you want, Professor Sycamore and Cynthia. They were just great. They were the best supporter cards we had at the time, just like they are the best supporter cards that we have now. You had to play them. They were that gosh darn good. They helped you get set up. They helped you get rolling. And if this deck got rolling, it won most of the time. We also played Seeker here, which firstly allowed you to pick up and reuse things like Jirachi and Shaymin, but it also allowed you to get a Pokemon off your opponent's bench. This was a fast deck, so if you could make them pick up their only bench Pokemon while killing their active, you won the game. We also saw Pokegear 3.0 here, just a nice little card to help you search out your supporter cards. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck, put a supporter card from there into your hand. Hopefully you would get the one that you wanted. Want a weird card that we played in this deck that very few people have ever played? How about Energy Exchanger? A card which has never actually gotten a reprint. What you did was you played Energy Exchanger and you put 1 energy from your hand into your deck and searched whatever one you wanted. We don't have a good way to search for double colorless energy. We didn't have a good way back then, but this would help you do so. We also played Energy Switch. Energy Switch is basically like a little mini Shaymin. It gets your energy off of your Jirachi onto your Regigigas. We played Lost Remover, although I did eventually remove that because it ended up being a bit less useful, but it just put special energy from your opponent's Pokemon into Lost Zone, slowed them down, you set up fast, slow down your opponent, you win the game. And Super Scoop Up, which is another card that I did remove towards the end of playing this deck, and I did play this deck for a long time, a couple months pretty solidly, and Super Scoop Up was basically like a Seeker, but just for you. Reuse Jirachi, reuse your Shaman, heal up your Regigigas, etc. Now, at the time, this had, for a short period at least, very good matchups against a lot of the decks. Mewtwo was absolutely everywhere, but that's okay, because you can just use your own Mewtwo, especially with Side Drive. Electric decks were everywhere, and although these weren't too easy, you would generally have a little bit of a speed advantage here, and you could take out their big attackers. Durant was a bit of a problem. I basically never lost to Durant in tournament after tournament, and then I went to one tournament where I was doing really well, lost in the last round to Durant, and then got knocked out in top 8 by Durant. Generally speaking, if you got a Regigigas going, you just hit for 80 damage a turn, knocking out all their Durants, piling energy on and hoping they don't hit too many hammers. You hit a Jirachi or two in the early game and you are absolutely golden. We also saw that there were some Electrode Prime variants around, using cards like Cobalion and Terrakion. Electrode Prime, I got smashed by one of these at the ECC, but it's literally just if they hit a good Energy Might early on a Terrakion, they win, otherwise they basically can't win. Zekrom decks were around being played with stuff like Pachirisu and Shaman, but again, you should be KOing these quite easily, and generally you could keep going better than they could. And Reshiram was running around, either played with Typhlosion or played with Emboar, but similarly, you could just get quite easy one-hit KOs on Reshiram here, and generally speaking, that would be enough to round out these games. When Terrakion started getting more and more popular, this deck started getting worse and worse, and essentially this deck just turned into Celebi Mewtwo instead of Regigigas Jirachi. But for a short period of time, it was a really, really good deck. I went and won a Cities with it, I top cut other tournaments with it, I bubbled at the ECC, the largest tournament in Europe, with this deck. I did do a couple of tournament reports on 6 prizes, I'll pop links to them in the description. This was a very fun deck. It was pretty much an early version of CMT, but I liked it a lot more, and my boy Regigigas was awesome. So now I want to hear from you guys. Did you ever play a deck with Regigigas EX? What do you think of this deck? Give me your thoughts, give me your memories, go nuts! But be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and so on, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, and do make sure you check out Wossy Plays for some more Wossy action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.